Home the gold.
He could be too far. No, he's kicking. Oh, what a catch!
Puts a spicy forehand out in front of Naomi Morcilla.
Woo for the win. Team Canada. Garrett Woo!
Santos with the layout grab.
Oh, that fantastic grab. The claws of Chaffer.
Canada just became the world champions.
Yo, Canada and the rest of the world, it's been a bit of time. So we want to say happy holidays, happy new year, new you. I'm one of your hosts, Theo and from the east side, Toronto, Ontario.
And I'm Danie Provy. I'm your best host from the West Coast, Vancouver, BC. We are your coast-to-coast guide to all things Canadian Ultimate. And you might have missed us, just like we've missed you. It's been a long time since you've heard the sweet, sweet sounds of our voices. So we want to apologize, first of all, and then also thank you for being so devoted to us. So we did originally record this episode, so you'll hear the main bulk of the episode on Spirit, and our outro and also our subscriber only section was recorded in December 10th. I think we look back. So if there's some things that seem like it's a little bit dated, that's why. So it's a busy time of year. Ultiworld had 2 major events happening in December that don't normally happen. So we're a little bit behind on our posting. So we'd like to apologize to all of you, but it's going to be worth it. It's a good episode. So before we get into Spirit, I want to know how your holiday spirit was, Theo.
Holiday cheer, the eggnog and stuff. I did not have that this year. I don't normally. But, I played some Frisbee, climbed some boulders, hung out with my brother, and dug out the old N64. So for those who know what the N64 is, I mean, some of our audience might not, we have a varying age of audience here, Danie, so some of them might not know what N64 is. But that system was good in the heyday there in the 90s. So I went on a little bit of a Boxing Day
what games?
Craze. And I bought WWF No Mercy, Perfect Dark, Super Smash Brothers, the original, and the N64. Come on. That's some good value right there. Got a little Boxing Day deals. So if you're in Toronto, you want to play, holla at your boy. So
nice.
Danie, I didn't do anything, too adventurous. But on your story, along with Toli Vasilyev, who also I've seen, do some adventurous things going on in the cold waters, you did something like that. So tell us about that, because that sounds way too cold for my blood.
It's definitely not something that I would normally do, and I do need to credit Ari, because he's the type of person that does stuff like that, and I just think that he's cool, so I do with things that he does. And so we went down to the Fraser River, and we went to do a little plungy plunge on New Year's Day to kind of ring in the new year and kind of cleanse ourselves of 2021. And we had to literally wait for ice chunks to float by so we could get into the water, and that's not normally how it is in Vancouver. So it was an extra cold polar bear dunk, and yeah, it feels good after, for sure. We ended up getting a little bit of an audience, so it was a bit funny. There's a bunch of kids watching with their parents being like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? And we didn't really have a good answer for them. So that's that. Christmas was good. It's my sister's first time hosting all of us. She did great. My dog, during Christmas dinner, decided that she wanted to have some turkey too. So she went over to the table where all the food was and grabbed a turkey leg and some bacon and just munching along without us noticing. So Christmas miracle for her. She was stoked. Not much else, I think, other than that. I would have to kind of get back to you, but I think that was it. It was a lot of family time, and it's been really nice. And yeah, one thing that has happened since December 10th is that we're going to talk about it later, but the beach team rosters dropped, and I am proud to announce that I'm going to be playing on the mixed team, which is going to be really fun. And then I've also made the club masters team out of Quebec. So I got picked up for cold, which I'm really excited for as well. So I'll be going to Ireland in June, I think, which I'm excited for. To have some Guinness and also to play Frisbee. So very exciting.
Yeah, I mean, Danie, I always, feel in the shadow of Jocelyn Danie Proby. When I saw, on the list there, I was like, who's this Jocelyn Proby? Because I know a Danie Proby, but trying to figure out who that was. But congrats to you. And those who we'll obviously talk about this in the news section, but I did not know about the Masters thing. So that's pretty cool. Looks like you're going to be booking a lot of Aeroplan miles or air miles there in 2022.
Yes, I am hopefully going to be making up for lost time for all the tournaments that we've been missing. Fingers and toes are all crossed because I don't count any chickens before they're hatched anymore with Ultimate tournaments. So we'll see.
Yeah, and speaking of Ultimate tournaments, we're going to talk about some things that happened in the Ultimate world here from the time that we recorded till now. So we're going to head to the news right this second.
We now have breaking news.
Welcome to your news section. So as we said, the beach team rosters were announced, and I think it ended up being that all divisions that they were going forwards with ended up getting enough teams to be able to have the tournament. So as of right now, WIFDF is saying the tournament is on. Of course, with the new variant and all these things going on, it's kind of hard to be 100% certain about everything. But the most recent information says that the COVID-19 working group with WIFDF has assessed the pandemic effects for travel within the US. And as of right now, they're moving forwards with planning. People are supposed to be paying fees and that kind of thing. So again, as you just said at the top, we're not going to be counting any chickens, but right now, WIFDF, the Masters Club Championships is moving forwards and the beach tournament is moving forwards. Haven't heard anything about juniors. I assume senior clubs is still going as well. So I know juniors is a little bit more difficult because they're juniors and there's a lot of other issues that come to play there. So I would expect that an announcement would be coming in the next couple of weeks regarding that tournament, but we don't have anything yet.
Yeah, Danie, first of all, appreciate you sharing the hot, right off the press news, right? Get the emails and giving it to the Huckin Eh audience there, telling them about what's going on. So, yeah, exciting to hear about beach. And we discussed this off air, but, I was wondering about World Games, but that's kind of organized by a different group. So you got to look at the World Games itself. And, Danie, one thing I forgot to mention about what I did during the holidays is a lot of college football watching. So I'm, a lot of it. And during one of the bowls, I think it was the Birmingham Bowl, and they talked about World Games, like how it was coming to Birmingham, Alabama. So that was a pretty cool. Obviously, they didn't talk about Ultimate Frisbee or anything, but they did say Birmingham, home of the World Games in 2022. So that was kind of cool.
Yeah, hopefully that can run too. Yeah, I think something like that would be more likely. I know they canceled Layout, which is in January, which is a beach tournament, which made me think that WIFDF, that made me feel like Beaches was most likely going to be canceled, but it's not so far. So I'm really grateful for that. And also I know they canceled the World Junior Hockey Championships. So juniors are a different story. I know it's more complicated. So I kind of was kind of preparing for the worst, hoping for the best. So yeah, hopefully all of these athletes can see the field.
Yeah. And, you might not know this, but if you know, you probably were, like we like to say, living under a rock, but the uni nationals that Danie was referring to earlier, like that, they had some COVID issues as well. I know, like 10 a.m. in the morning or something like that. I think I messaged you. I was like, hey, look what happened. Look what happened at this tournament. So one team having to basically be disqualified or bow themselves out because of COVID issues. So, it'll be interesting to see what happens in the next few months. Really hoping that we don't have a repeat of past years and not having these big tournaments. Yeah. But, this is kind of doom and gloomy. So we're going to bring up the chipperness here with the rosters. So we're not going to go through each name. We're not going to go through all the rosters because they're up there on the Ultimate Canada Instagram and other social media outlets. You can check that all out. But Danie, first of all, we talked about this with the World Games pool about how they got, a phone call and stuff. Did you get a phone call or was it an email or what'd you get?
I got the two-pronged attack of personal message and email kind of like at the same time, personally. And I think most people would have just gotten an email. It's a little bit less intense, I think, than than World Games. And so, yeah, I think one thing that I do think was interesting for the mixed team specifically, everybody accepted their roster spot, which I don't think is normal. Or I think that there's usually things that come up where people don't accept, or maybe they wanted one team and another, but everybody on the mixed team ended up accepting, which is pretty cool. And I know for those World Games players, they weren't told no, but they were advised to think like wisely about the training and their bodies and that kind of thing going into World Games. So I don't recall how many people were on both, but I don't think any, if many, were double dipping.
Yeah, I know a few that basically declined their roster spot because of that, for that reason. So it's always good to, lay out as many, we're going to use the chicken analogy, lay out as many eggs as possible, right? So, with the rosters, all the way up to Grandmasters Open, like there's a lot of options there and a lot of people making it. So congrats to each and every one of you, even the alternates, everyone. Congratulations, you're representing our country. We're hoping that it's a go, but special shout out to those who this is their first Team Canada. Like I said, we're not going to go through the whole list, but there are definitely people there that have not played a Team Canada before. And so if that's you, congratulations. You get to wear the maple leaf and play Frisbee.
Yeah.
So anything else you want to say about the beach rosters, Danie? I know, we talked a little bit about your experience, but anything else?
No, I think the teams, they look exciting. I know a lot of people were also disappointed and some people were surprised for sure, as they always are. Coaches have a really tough task because I've been on both sides of this situation where you're selecting a team and people think that you've snubbed people or you've made decisions and people don't agree with them. And that is just kind of part of the process, unfortunately. And it's not easy to be in that position where you're kind of like making and taking away dreams. So I feel for everybody, for those that didn't make it and for the coaches having to make really tough decisions. It's not fun. So shout out to the coaches because I know that they did a lot of checking in with coaches, checking references, checking video and game tape. They did a lot of research to make sure that they were building the team that they wanted. So yeah.
And Danie, since we were, like we said, we recorded that main part, a bit of time ago. I don't remember if we said this on air or off air, so I'll just say this on air now. But when we were talking to Khalif about, the beach championships and things, they were talking about the tryouts that happen in the U.S., whereas here it's just a selection, through resume and things. But my opinion, I'm just gonna throw it out there, is it disadvantages people that A, don't play on the top team in their city, / B, don't get a lot of game film. So could there be tryouts? I don't know. All I'm saying is it disadvantages people that don't have a lot of game film available.
Sure, but also maybe not. But maybe don't play that well on the games that are filmed, then it's a disadvantage for sure. And also, if you're playing on your city's B team, then you're probably not making a Team Canada anyway. So I don't know if I agree with that part of it. It is tough, say, if you come from a place that isn't Vancouver or Toronto or Quebec, like Montreal area or Winnipeg. Like on the mixed team, there's actually a player from Edmonton and there's a player from Saskatoon, I believe. So there is some geographic diversity, but I think it's hard to say whether the rosters would have shifted too much if they were in-person tryouts. Maybe.
Yeah, I just want to see if like certain people that they just like sling it better on the beach. I know Deep Look has talked about that as well. So it'd be interesting to see, like, because even if you have game film, kind of talking about what you just said about the game film thing, even if you have game film, most of it's probably on grass anyways. So it's not like you have a lot of beach game film. So I hear your point. I like the pushback. It's always good for the podcast there.
We usually agree, so we got to disagree sometimes.
I know. I think people are waiting for us to get into fisticuffs here or something. So we're going to move on here to quick uni results, which was an event that, happened like eons ago now.
A year ago.
But, classic. So the women's division went to McMaster and the Open went to Carleton. So I know from just organizing some of the tournaments for Ultimate Canada back, what year would it have been? 2020 now? It's kind of trying to think of it. 2020, right before actually COVID happened. Carleton was, one of those powerhouse teams that seems to send like 3 or 4, I think 3 teams at least to these indoor national events. So congratulations to them. There was supposed to be a tournament happening mid-January in Markham, and that has been canceled, and we'll see and wait for further clearance about these other events. So, it's all up in the air.
Yeah, I guess for all of you non-West Coast people, all your tournaments have to be inside, so you have to set a lot more strict regulations, I assume, on those things.
Yeah, the 4v4 is indoors, and we're not playing, like, even right now as we're talking. There was snow outside, and it's like -8 or something, so we're definitely not playing outside in that kind of weather. Even though I've seen like videos, I think in Winnipeg when they have run practices out in the cold, maybe it was for a joke or something, or in the snow. They've done some like funny videos about that. But I know, Vancouver, you guys have ultimate year round. We're just jealous out here in the East. That's all I'm saying.
I mean, it's been like many feet of snow here for weeks. We've never experienced, well, from my experience, this is not normal, like having this much snow. So haven't been able to like play or do, like I had to cancel in-person training with Elevate. Like there's lots of stuff that we couldn't do because of snow on the ground. And it was like, oh, normally it's just like raining and dark and freezing, not snowy and dark and freezing. So
would you have ultimate indoors, like indoor leagues, or would it still be outdoors?
We don't typically. There's some VUL stuff that happens inside of gyms, but there's not a lot of indoor turf. That doesn't really exist.
Interesting. The indoor gym just reminds me of all the European indoor tournaments. Like when I've seen some of those highlights on Reddit, and they're just like laying out full extension on the gym floor, and I'm like, that's the norm over there. So
yeah, it's very exciting. And speaking of exciting, enough of us. We're boring. This news was pretty cool, but we have some incredible guests on this episode. We're talking about Spirit, and I do need to preface it by saying, I do say this in the outro, but I want to set people up by saying all 5 of us are kind of coming at Spirit from a kind of competitive lens. So top teams in adults playing in club tournaments, potentially Team Canada type situations. So that is the lens that most of the conversation is coming from. And we talk a little bit less about kind of more rec or like tier 2, div 2 type Spirit, because I think that there's a time and a place for many, like a big wide spectrum of Spirit. And so I just want to like make sure that everyone kind of like has that filter on as they're listening to this, because there's some hot takes. It gets spicy. I'm excited. So Theo, any thoughts before we dive in?
Yeah, I'm actually really excited for this because I want to see, I think people are going to expect something. They're going to hear something else. And yeah, like we'll see. We'll see what the DMs say about it. I think we say in the outro as well that you could send us stuff, but definitely interested on the feedback of what the guests say, because it might not be what you think is all I'm going to say, Danie.
And that's the best. We want to keep everyone guessing. So without further ado, we're gonna head to our main event after we hear from our sponsor, Be Ultimate.
This episode is brought to you by Be Ultimate Apparel. Based out of Vancouver, BC, Be Ultimate is climate neutral certified and designs products that are built to perform. I personally love my 2 sun hoodies from them, and I rock them wherever I go. If you want to learn more about Be Ultimate, or if you're a club team captain and want to take advantage of their no strings attached offer for a free jersey, head over to beultimate.ca or visit the link in the show description.
This is Mike Haddock, founder of Haddock Sport Performance and strength and conditioning coach for Ultimate Canada, and you're listening to the Huckin Eh podcast, your coast-to-coast guide for all things Canadian Ultimate.
All right, welcome back. Main event. We got some esteemed guests for you talking about Spirit of the Game. Pretty excited about it. So we'll let the guests introduce themselves, starting off with Alison, otherwise known as Fish.
Well, thanks for having me. I am a former Ultimate player, having played for 20 years, mostly out of Montreal. I played a couple of cycles of Team Canada, mixed in 2004, and Masters a couple of times as well. I retired in 2016, and since then I've been coaching. So I coach Iris, which is Team Quebec, I coached Team Canada U24 in the last cycle, which was 2019. Well, the last cycle that we had because of COVID. And this season, I'm coaching Team Canada Women's Beach, which should be a fun challenge. And I guess I'll see Khalif there.
Cool. And you also on some like Spirit of the Game, you've done some committees and stuff, correct?
Yes, I have been on the Ultimate Canada Spirit of the Game committee for too many years. I've actually stepped back from that now, but I did 5 or 6 years. And I don't know how much this is valuable, but the teams that I played for generally did pretty well in Spirit, at least on the Canadian scene. We won several years in a row. And actually, Iris won Spirit at the UCI this season.
Awesome. And our other guest, we're going to bless ourselves with someone not just from Canada here. So why don't you introduce yourself there, Khalif?
Hi, my name's Khalif El-Salaam. I've been playing Ultimate for about 15 years now. I currently play for Seattle Mixtape. We're in the off season, which is exciting. But I coach as well. I coach high school, boys, mixed, and women's. And outside of Ultimate, I am a business boy, strategic business consultant, and I do a lot of dancing, both hip hop and Latin dance.
That's so sick. Now, Khalif, we met coaching at Cut Camp, so I know that you are very, very impactful with the youth. They just like eat up everything that you do and say on the field. So it's awesome that we have 2 people on this panel here talking about Spirit of the Game that are also just people that give back and coach the next generation. So we are very, very lucky. And also, yeah, congratulations for making the mixed beach team, Khalif. It's very cool.
Huzzah. I was going to say, you'll see me there, but you're coaching the women, so you'll see me from afar.
Yeah.
Oh, I'll come watch.
Oh, thanks.
So this whole episode's about Spirit of the Game. We have kind of a bunch of prompts to go through, and the first one is basically a question they ask whenever you're applying for any Team Canada or coaching position. It's, what does Spirit of the Game mean to you? And I honestly hate filling this question out on an application because I find it really hard to put into words. So I'm going to bless you both with the esteemed of having to describe it in your own words. So Fish, let's start with you. What does Spirit of the Game mean to you?
It's a good question. I think that over time it's evolved. And as I coach, especially young kids, I think at the end of the day, I try to look at it as it's more a teaching tool about the way that we should be treating other people and the way that we can expect to be treated versus, like what specific showmanship or activities are allowed or not allowed or judged on the field for being, too intense or not intense enough or too loud or not loud enough. But I'm trying more and more to push towards like recognizing that everybody is a human first, and we have to meet people, where they are, accept them for what they are, and we may not always agree. And I think, especially on the, arguing calls and things like that, like there's many ways you can look at it, but at the end of the day, as long as you're willing to listen to the other person, you don't have to agree with them. You don't have to come to an agreement. That's why you can always throw the disc back. But at least be open enough to be willing to listen to someone else's point of view.
Brilliant. Khalif, how about you?
I guess I'll start off by saying I think that's it's a very trash question to put on a national team questionnaire, because at no point do I think they're really like deciding between 2 people and then they're like, we're going to take this person because their definition of what spirit is better than this person's. So I think it's just low-key a waste of time. But for me, spirit is very simple. In my opinion, spirit is just like a very strong knowledge of what the rules are and not like using the rules advantageously or like ignoring rules advantageously, like in order to win. I think that's my definition. My definition of spirit is just that, knowing the rules and playing by the rules. I'm not a huge proponent of the whole like talk through it past. Like I think this, like we both know the rule. Here's what I think what happened. Here's what I think what happened. Okay, contest, send it back type thing. The conversation part of spirit to me is also a little unnecessary, but I know that that's against the grain. So
now, Theo, when we were talking offline, you had mentioned something about intentional fouls. I think this is a good time for you to out yourself as somebody who intentionally fouls and doesn't play within the rules.
No, I've done it like once or twice, like back in the day. But yes, I have done that before. Like I will admit. So that would go against Khalif's spirit of the game definition.
Agreed. I just thought I would shout you out.
I mean, to combat that a little bit, I like definitely draw fouls, and I don't know if I would necessarily put that on the same, those two things on the same level, because I have played against like Canadians who are like, oh, this person is wide open for this huck, I'm just gonna foul them so they don't throw it, and then now we all know it's coming, so at least we can help. Like I've definitely been in that scenario, in which case I was like, wow, you're cheating because you fouled me on purpose, but you know. They're like, I'm not contesting that I fouled you. Then you sort of like, you're in this like weird thing. But I also like draw fouls all the time. Like I know that I can draw a foul and I'll go for it 100%. And people are like, well, you're cheating because you're drawing a foul. And it's like that sort of like gray area where our sport really isn't in that situation yet. Like similar to like WNBA when they're like fouling on purpose or trying to draw fouls when they're shooting. So it's a touchy subject, I guess.
Yeah, it's a good one for debate.
Yeah, I mean, that could be like subscriber only or something, Danny, for later, something like that. But let's first talk about some of the good things or aspects of Spirit of the Game that you both are proud of, both as players and as coaches. So, Khalif, we'll start with you this time. What's something you're proud of in terms of how Spirit of the Game is currently right now?
I think for a coach, from a coaching perspective, it does teach kids conflict resolution at a very early age. Not only teaches them conflict resolution, but teaches them how to like have an opinion and defend an opinion against somebody who doesn't want you to be saying what you're saying. Especially when I coach women's ultimate, it's very hard to get them to call travels and fouls and call their picks and stuff like that because they don't want to. But you know, towards the end of the season, when you're able to see them like stand up for themselves, have these hard critical conversations, they're also usually better at it in general. But giving them a platform to actually do that, I think is really good. In terms of the state of which Spirit is right now, coaching like POC kids particularly is really difficult because Spirit of the Game, speaking from the US, is like very white. So when you're coaching POC kids and you're trying to get them to have these conversations with people who automatically like see them as more aggressive, more likely to foul, or more likely to contest, or more likely to cheat, it makes those conversations significantly more difficult. So I would say that the state of the Spirit of the Game from a POC perspective is still pretty lacking unbiasedness and some fairness. But I think from the perspective of a coach, like coaching like women, I think it's great, and it teaches them like good things like conflict resolution and ability to stand their ground when they make their calls. So intersectionality and whatnot.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that, and we will get to some qualms or things about Spirit that we find problematic. So you'll be able to keep those and share those there, Khalif. But Fish, do you have anything to add for things you're proud of with Spirit of the Game?
I definitely agree in terms of the coaching, especially coaching younger kids and girls in particular. I actually asked I have two kids, 11 and 13, and they're both girls and they both play. And I asked them before this podcast what they actually liked about Spirit of the Game and why they liked it and why they think it's important. And like similar to along Khalif's line of reasoning, you know, they're able to stand up for themselves. They're able to, you know, say, no, I think that was a foul, or, you know, I no, you definitely push me out of the way, or whatever the situation is, more so than in other sports that I've seen. So conflict resolution for sure. I don't know if there's anything else at the elite women's level that I would say. I think what Khalif touched on earlier in terms of like just knowing the rules really well. When I coached Team Canada U24, as we all know, that we were playing WIFDIF regulations for the international tournaments, and a lot of the players on that team had played previous Team Can iterations or other international tournaments, and none of them had ever done a rules comparison between the two in conversation. They'd taken the test or done the whatever your requirement was, but we actually sat down before the tournament and went through all the rules. Okay, this is this rule for what USAU is, and this is what it is for WIFDIF, so let's just try to make that adjustment. And I just found it so interesting that they had never done that before. So knowing the rules, understanding the value of the rules, I mean, obviously that's open to interpretation in terms of who created the rules, if you want to go there, but it's important lessons at least.
Yeah, I find that along the same lines, it's been a very useful tool for coaching, and the parts that I find different than when I played other competitive sports is just how I feel about the other team afterwards. Like whether there's a spirit circle or not, I found that, I don't know if it's the atmosphere, like I take things a lot less. Well, I take things personally. Like I have just as much drive to like win and beat the other team, but it doesn't feel like it's as vicious as when I'd played basketball or volleyball. Like I didn't necessarily automatically hate everybody else in the other team. And I'm not sure if that has to do with spirit or just the fact that it's a Frisbee and it's harder to take it as like aggressively seriously or something. But anyways, on the lines of spirit and maybe things that we're not so proud of or things that we find that are a bit more problematic, I know Theo and I have similar thoughts on certain aspects of spirit, and I think that they're very sort of contradictory to what a lot of people who've been playing the game for a long time feel. So I am curious from the two of you, what aspects of spirit do you think right now are problematic or need to change or need to have a big paradigm shift? And let's start with whoever looks away from the camera first. They're making, Khalif's just going to go. Let's go. Khalif's muted though, so he's not going to go.
Yeah, I'll just talk to myself. It's fine. I think the first thing that I wanted to speak to was just the fact that I believe that spirit in general is just like a social norm, since like nobody has the same definition of what spirit of the game is. Every person, if you ask them what it was, they would say something different. For me, that means that it's a social norm. It's like a combination of all those things, sort of like hodgepodge, and then people just like, act underneath that sort of umbrella. But also what it causes is for anybody who goes outside of that sort of like hodgepodge to be like either exiled or isolated or like seen as weird or unspirited in a lot of the senses. And there are like 6 to 7 things that like, if you don't do these things, then you are unspirited. And if you don't do them consistently over time, then you're deemed this like unspirited player that nobody wants to participate with or be on a team with. And your friends have to like advocate for you. So like, I'm obviously like a big proponent of not doing high five lines. I hate high five lines after a game for a lot of reasons. And when I first, like, I've always hated high five lines, but I've just done them because I've always believed that if I didn't do them, I wasn't spirited until, I became a grown adult and I was like, I can make my own decisions. The first decision I'm going to make is like what my definition of spirit is, instead of just like listening to all these other people tell me what it is. What do I think it is? And, at the base level, I think that spirit is just like a knowledge of the rules and not cheating and using the rules to your advantage. Great. You know what that doesn't include? High five lines. Awesome. Okay, I don't have to do it anymore. After the game's over, I'm just going to go over to my stuff. I'm going to sit down. And for the beginning, I had a whole bunch of people be like, why do you hate the other team? Why, like, do you think you're too good for us? It's like, no, I just don't want to slap hands with you. You'll be fine. And for a long time, I got a lot of backlash for it. not participating in the high five line because people, since it didn't fit underneath the social norm of like an action that defines spirit, I was deemed unspirited. And I had a lot of conversations with people, let alone arguments about like, why was it so important for me to be in a high five line after the game? And, you know, I had a lot of people being like, oh, well, it's like sportsmanlike, and like it shows respect, blah, blah, blah. And, you know, my rebuttal is like, I should be showing you respect during the game by trying my hardest and not cheating. Like, that's the way that I show respect to you. Me not wanting to give you a high five after the game is not disrespectful. And I don't know why you think it is, but just because you think it's disrespectful, I don't think that it's fair for you to call me unspirited. And then I was like, if I was like super mean and rude and awful to you and bit into your legs the whole game, but I got in the high five line, does that mean that I'm spirited? Well, no. It's because how I act in game and play against you is a reflection of how spirited or how much I know the rules, not if I give you a high five after the game. So I think that that's one of the biggest problematic things for me is that if somebody does something outside the realm of the hodgepodge of what spirit is in terms of action, that, you know, isn't genuine misuse of the rules, that they are sort of like ostracized, which I think is pretty dramatic.
Yeah, I've seen you on Twitter a lot talking about this over the years, and I've seen people commenting and replying to stuff. And as you said, there's people that are basically trying to convince you, and then there's other people that support you. And it seems like, from my perspective, it seems unnecessarily controversial when you post stuff like that. And I think that when you do post things like that on Twitter that are against the norm of what we see in the sport, I think it's really important because it does create a lot of conversations from people, and it makes people challenge, like, why do I feel like we have to do these things? Oh, because it's always been done that way. And that's problematic in itself. So I've always appreciated your spicy hot takes on the Twitter.
Yeah, everybody who's against me is very loud about it on Twitter. And then everyone who supports me is like quietly in my DMs being like, yeah, Khalif,
that's me.
You tell it.
I'm just like so quiet.
We support you from over here in the closet. Great, keep it up, man. I'm like, oh, all right. Well, I'll just go ahead and take these rocks to the chest. I got you.
Okay, that's my cue to be more public about my support. All right. And Fish, how about you? Anything that you find problematic at this current state of Ultimate?
Well, I think Khalif touched on it in that, I mean, so much, if not all of spirit is subjective, right? And where are these norms coming from? Who created them? Why do we feel like behaving, you know, in a nice manner means that you're spirited? I always had a hard time with being on the Spirit of the Game committee for Ultimate Canada. And we'd have discussions every cycle of like, what are we going to make the Canadian teams do to prepare to have good spirit when they show up at these World tournaments, so that everyone looks at Canada and says, hey, Canada, you guys are, you know, not as bad as you were in 2012. Let's say that. Sly reference. But it's subjective. The other team is giving you a score based on what? Like, how they feel the game went? I mean, you either won or lost. Those are the numbers. Those are the facts. You won or you lost. I mean, assuming that you didn't cheat to win. And, you know, whether you score a 10 or a 12 or an 8 or like, how is that like a mandate from your country that says you need to be in the top half of spirit? You don't control what the other teams give you. I mean, you can act in the way in which you think that you're going to get good spirit scores, but what if that doesn't happen? What if one person decides that your team was terrible and that's the person doing the spirit scoring and they give you ones all across the board? You know, so you end up with like a decently low number, whatever, 4, 5, 6. Does that mean that you're an unspirited team or that the other team just scored you poorly? I always struggled with this, and still do today. Like, do you want to build your team in a way that you're designing your program so that you're going to get good spirit scores? Like, is that a goal? And then, I don't know. that's one issue for me. And the other issue, like we were talking about earlier, is like the spirit circles and the communication where it's, similar to like what Khalif was saying with the high fives. Like, you might not feel like being in the spirit circle. You might have lost. You might be pissed. You might have no interest in, chatting it out and talking about how great your game is, and then turning around, the other team scores you in a lower spirit score than you thought the spirit circle gave you. And the spirit circle in the olden days was, from my memory, was used when spirit was really terrible and there were basically fights breaking out on the field, and then there was like a timeout called, and it was a spirit timeout. Like, then the teams might get together to discuss things. But having them all the time, it sort of takes away from the whatever value they once had.
I see Khalif slapping along to your thoughts there, Fish. So thanks for sharing that. And yeah, this conversation can go for a very long time, I feel like. So I like that we brought two passionate people on here, Danie, for the conversation. So in regards to kind of some of the things you mentioned, both of you, what would be some? We'll talk about spirit scores later, but what would be some changes you would want to see, if at all, like to how spirit is discussed or taught or even enforced from a national level, as we talked about with national teams and things like that, requirements for coaches, all those kind of things. So what would be some changes you'd want to see? So whoever wants to answer first can answer.
I'll jump in. So what do y'all off the top of your head know the five questions, not questions, but the
spirit categories?
Yes, thank you. Off the top of your head.
Rules, knowledge, and use.
Boom. Love that.
Fair-mindedness.
That's the one I know.
Rules, knowledge, and use. Keep that. Like, there's like positivity
and something.
Body contact.
Body contact.
So my response to your question is, there are the 5 spirit categories. Some of them need to stay, and the other ones need to go. The ones that need to stay have to do with the actual game. Like, you should be ranking them on the actual, like, when the 7 people are out on the field, the actual game, respect between the players, maybe some stuff on the sideline. But so rules, knowledge, and use definitely needs to stay in there. Fouls and body contact definitely needs to stay there. Like, but the one about like, oh, were they positive? Take it out. Take it out. You can play a team that's just negative the whole time, but if they don't cheat, they don't say anything that is like rude or disrespectful to you, like as the other player. Yeah, I really need these 5. I'm going to Google these 5. These spirit categories. Spirit.
Fair-mindedness.
Fair-mindedness? Like, what does that even mean?
How are you judging people on their fair-mindedness? I totally agree. I mean, honestly, I would consider just, like, get rid of the spirit scoring. I mean, the thing that I found useful in recent years is, we always have spirit captains on our teams, and they go and talk to the other spirit captains at the beginning of the game, and then they talk to them at the middle of the game, and they're like, is there anything that needs adjusting? Do you feel like how are fouls and like the 2 things? Do we know the rules, and how are no? We never say like, are we being fair-minded? Are we being consistent in our calls? And then an adjustment can happen from there, and it generally works out pretty well that the games are, regardless of the score, relatively well managed because there's an open line of communication with the other team. It's not like we're trying to be best friends with them. We're just saying like, is there anything that you as a team feel like we are not doing correctly at this current moment in time? And then if we agree, we'll make an adjustment. And another thing that we do is, even though, to your point, the 5 categories are maybe not the best, we will score our own team as well. So like, at least for us, we're consistent. Like, are we being consistent across opponents, with the way that we're behaving according to these spirit score requirements? Because the other team is just subjective. They liked us, they didn't like us. It's going to be reflected in your spirit scores.
I found. Okay. Rules, knowledge, and use. That one can stay. That's totally fine. Fouls and body contact. That one needs to stay for people's safety. Fair-mindedness. I'm on the fence about it. It says players apologize in situations where it was appropriate. I don't know why apologizing is necessary. Inform teammates about wrong or unnecessary calls, and only called significant breaches. I feel like you could just take that out. Like, I don't think you should judge a teammate on if they went up to the teammate, hey, that call you made, that was a bad call. But just make good calls, because guess what? There's rules, knowledge, and use, and they should only make calls that are within the rules. Attitude and self-control, take it out. Self-control, you could just put it in fouls and body contact, but I don't need you to judge me on if I was like polite to you. I don't think I could not talk to you the whole time and have it be just fine. And then communication, I feel like they just threw that one in there. But I guess communication is like necessary, because if I make a call, I need you to listen to me and vice versa. But I think 2 of these can just be taken out, and they could take that third one and just pop it into rules, knowledge, and use, fouls, and body contact, call it good. But judging people on like how they treat you is where the biggest subjectiveness comes in. Like I've been given a 0 on attitude, but not because my self-control was bad, because my attitude was bad. And my attitude was bad just because, like, you lay out onto my back, so I spike it on you, and now I get a 0? No way. No shot. You're giving me a 0 for attitude. No chance. But, yeah, I think that's the biggest thing for me that should change. And then, like Alison was talking about, those spirit circles, garbage, complete waste of time. Spirit timeouts, great, cool, keep them in. But that, if anything, like I know that you talk about taking away the spirit captains, but if anything, the spirit captains need to be handling all that. Like on mixtape, the spirit captains, we work them. We're like, hey, you go talk, come back, we're working our spirit captains.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
We don't want to have
spirit
to
captains do a big job, and they're the main communicators on this topic with the other teams. And if we keep in that communication category, it would be solely based on like how well they are actually communicating with the other team, making sure that we're all on the same page.
Those are my 2 cents.
Yeah. When did spirit circles become common? Because when I started playing college, there was no spirit circles ever. And then I believe it was at Northwest Challenge. There was the tragic car accident that happened with the Carleton players. And then Northwest Challenge was the next weekend or something. And I think it was China or somebody was like, we should be doing spirit circles and kind of honoring these players. And we did spirit circles after every game. It was the first time I'd ever done it. And it just never stopped. And we just kept doing spirit circles for the rest of the season. And then I just remember always doing it in club after that too. So I don't know if anyone has a different idea or knowledge of when that started happening across the ultimate scene. Cause that's kind of where I started seeing it popping up.
I don't remember the exact date, but I remember it was after some international tournament, and Riot came back and started. Khalif, I don't know if you remember this, but they had some sort of focus on spirit circles and how you tell. I don't want to say tell the truth, but the goal of the spirit circle is actually to talk about the things that didn't go well in the game that people were unhappy with, not to say hey, you guys were so great, it was really fun, you threw your throws so far, yay, it was what they were supposed to be using it for was to resolve the conflicts that happened, so that they could improve going forward or something. I can't remember the exact discussion, but it was something along those lines then, which, okay, it seems like that could be a viable use of a spirit circle. But once again, sort of once in a while, maybe not all the time. And then, I don't know, I think de facto it became oh, everyone's doing it, we just got to do it, we have to do it, it's a thing, we have to do it, it's spirited to do a spirit circle. Otherwise your spirit scores are going to be terrible because you didn't want to do one at the end. But as we talked about, earlier before the podcast started, oftentimes in a spirit circle, the other team will say how great you were and then they'll score you poorly. So what's the point?
I've been doing spirit circles since when I first started playing Frisbee. And I did spirit circles from 2006 all the way up until maybe 2015. It was our second year playing mixtape, and we had to do spirit circles all the time. And then after that, we were just and nah, we don't need to do spirit. The first time we said no to a spirit circle, the shock that this because mixtape was already fighting the norm. We're already like against the norm. Like we barely want to do high five lines. We talk a little bit of smack. We're very
I
like.
feel like you also had a different name, maybe.
Yeah. Oh, and they don't want to do spirit circles. Classic. But it was like, hey, do y'all want to do a spirit? We lose a heartbreaker in the finals. Hey, do y'all want to do a spirit circle? No, we don't want to do a spirit circle with you. And like give you compliments on beating us. And they're like, what? Oh my gosh, how could you? And now ever since then we give them a little cheer, maybe cheer, wave to get snacks. It's great. Love every second of it. Perfect.
Yeah.
But my kids sometimes want to do spirit circles. Mostly again, it's just like they want to like give hype to the other team, I guess, and compliment on their things. And it's just like force of habit at this point. Whenever coaches ask me like, do y'all want to do a spirit circle? I'll always just be like, if the kids want to do it, sure. If they don't want to, do y'all want to do a spirit circle? Sure, go ahead, do a spirit circle. But if it's ever up to me, I'm not.
Yeah, I agree. As a coach, I never get involved in those spirit circles, whether in senior or in juniors. But I do know that my kids do like, well, I don't know, in COVID, it's now like 2 lines, so they can't actually do the circle. But like my kids love it. They think it's super cool that like, you know, you get to tell the other team or other specific players like why you think they're so great or what you like to playing against them. So, I mean, there's got to be some benefit, at least at the juniors level, that the kids are getting out of it.
Yeah, we flew in a special guest right now because I know that this person is like very, very passionate about spirit, and he just knew that we were talking about spirit, and he's like, get me on the podcast right now. So I do want to welcome Dave to the podcast. And do you want to introduce yourself? And if there's anything that you've heard us talking about since you flew in that you want to comment on, the floor is yours, my friend.
I feel like, have you ever walked into a lecture hall 30 minutes late and everyone stops and looks at you and you don't know what to do?
Yeah.
That's kind of how I felt for the last 10 minutes. My apologies. I don't know how time zones work. But happy to be here. Really excited to meet Alison and Khalif. I don't know if we've ever met, but we've been around similar circles, and Danie and Theo. Thanks for having me. Not a lot to say. My first question was going to kind of ask when I got here, well, did we cancel Spirit yet or not? Sounds like we're still in it, but we're looking at making some modifications. But no, not much to add yet. In terms of this topic that we're on right now, I think Spirit Circles are especially fun and maybe appropriate at the international tournaments that some of us have had a chance to play at, just because you get to interact with kind of the different languages and different cultures. But I kind of agree kind of with Khalif in that, you know, when you're in high level competition with teams that you play against frequently and you will play against again, you know, let people wallow in their loss and enjoy your victory internally with your team how you want to. I personally don't see the need to kind of, touch base. But yeah, I care a little more about the mechanisms of Spirit, which I hope we'll get into a little bit later. But yeah, so far, just enjoyed hearing kind of the feedback from these two, from Khalif and Alison. So yeah, nothing much to add so far, but I'm sure I'll dive right in.
Well, it's a good thing that you're here because we are going to be moving on to stuff about Spirit scores. And I have a lot of bad memories with Spirit scores. And again, I think that there's a place for everything in the sport, but I've had more bad examples of it being used than positive. And I just coach a lot of juniors, and sometimes they're more focused on trying to solicit good Spirit scores than they are focused on the game. And I don't necessarily like the lessons that teaches them. There's literally this like meme in Elevate right now where one of our coaches, when she was a junior, this other girl was just talking to her on her sideline. No, they were on the field playing, and she stopped her to say, "I really like your eyebrows." And it kills me. This is like at nationals. And it's just like the whole sole goal of trying to get a good Spirit score and trying to be like friends with the other team. And I think that it's nice to make friends with other teams, but again, time and a place. So Dave, we're going to be diving into your topic, Spirit scores. And I think that you do have an interesting take or an interesting concept that you shared with Theo and I a long time ago after UCI was done. And if you present that to us and the Huckin Eh audience, we would be So appreciative.
Sure. So I think Alison was mentioning a little bit earlier about how different teams score differently. And I think that's one thing that's really important when we consider this, right? Like the current standard that WIFDIF has kind of imposed on everyone is this, 1 to 4, 1 to 5. I don't even remember what it is right now, where the top score is supposed to be the best game you've ever played. And, a 0 is, well, the TD is going to come talk to you. So maybe you don't do zeros. And there's this system that they've kind of put everyone under, but everyone interprets it differently. And we've kind of used that scoring system as the kind of the common thread. And what happens is, different teams take it different levels of seriousness. And so you'll get teams that are like the fun ones that give everyone a top score and give no one a real score. Then you got teams that are really thoughtful about it, where most of those scores end up being average, and you get teams that are really grumpy with everyone and all their scores that they give are low. And so in my mind, Spirit, and specifically Spirit scores, are the only real mechanism we have to hold other teams accountable for how they play and the way they approach the game. And not to say that should be weaponized, but that really is the only way that teams can communicate their displeasure, for instance, with the team if they're fouling too much. And that should be, in my opinion, reflected in kind of final Spirit scores. But what happens is, if you don't normalize it to the way the teams give scores, if you have a team that played the nice team twice in a tournament, which happens, and a team that only played mean teams, that one team is going to be artificially inflated. And so then you get teams that, that take Spirit seriously, of which one of my programs does that. And we end up lower or higher depending on who we played against rather than how we played. And so I think it's a really important thing that when we're doing Spirit scores and, event officials and event coordinators, they normalize those scores to make sure that it's a true reflection of how your team was playing, not necessarily who your team was playing. And just, I think there's some easy ways to do that we just don't do. And so since we don't do those, we get this data that kind of is meaningless. And then we celebrate some teams and we kind of scowl at other teams, but none of it really matters. And I think it could matter and should matter.
So what was you talked to Theo and I, thank you first of all for sharing that, but you talked to Theo and I about kind of an idea that you'd had for making some adjustments to the process. Is that ringing a bell?
Yeah, I'm going to try and see if I can find the email maybe. It's mostly that normalization process, right? And so a 4 that my team gives is different than a 4 that Alison's team would give. And so that's kind of what I'm saying, where we need to basically average out all the scores that a team gives and then compare against that average for other teams when they receive that. And what that does is typically, at least when I've gone through that, it's changed kind of the final spirit rankings. And if you can have that be an accurate representation, what happens is now you've given teams and players a tool to, I don't want to say educate, but express that they disapprove of how other teams play in a way that's actually meaningful, or show approval, right? And so if we have a team, I'm not going to name any names, but we played in a game a few years ago where the other team was just playing a very different style to what we felt was appropriate, right? There are lots of intentional fouls on the marks, and kind of even saying things like, well, call the foul then, right? That kind of classic verbiage that happens. And, there were points where, an observer was there and, gave a person a PMF and they still contested the call kind of thing. And that team won the game and they beat us fair and square, but it would have been really nice for everyone to say, when they're celebrating the victory of this other team, yeah, they won, but they did it in kind of a nasty way, in a way that kind of doesn't really fall in line with the respect that they should be showing other teams. And I think that's a mechanism that we should be able to use against other teams, and conversely celebrate teams when they do that well, right? Like, it's not about eyebrows on the sideline, but if a team is, playing well and being excited and being super intense and fiery and able to keep that internalized to their own team and use that energy on the field, we should celebrate that. And let that, right now, the systems we have don't do either of those things.
Does anyone have any follow-ups to anything that Dave is saying before I dive into our Instagram generated content?
Yeah, it's very complex. I like the idea. I've never heard anybody pitch that before. And I definitely have, now that you're saying all that stuff is sort of clicking, where like there are teams who will give 4s and 5s way more often just because they're just the happier team that dances during halftime compared to my team. The other team. The other team was like, oh, intentional. Okay, we're going to give them a 2 because they were just normal. And so if you play just, say 4 times, you're going to get a lower score than if you played garbage 7 times. Garbage is an actual team. They actually do give very high spirit scores. So, wild. I'm intrigued.
That's a win.
Yeah, I'll take it. And mostly, like, I don't, I know, like, the one big change this year was, I think it was Iris BB at UCI, that there was like a 4 or 5 spot difference, right? And when we're looking at spirit scores, it may have actually been traffic, Danny. I don't remember. I'll try and find it at some other point. But like visually, we look at the people at the top, we look at them as the good guys, or the good folks, and then we look down and we're like, hey, those are the ruffians kind of thing. And we want to make sure I feel like that's not happening in a way that's fair, because the data we're using that we're forced to use doesn't matter. And if we just reframe the same scoring system, then it doesn't matter how the teams want to, rebel against the system by giving all 1s or all 4s, because they'll do it with everyone. And the team that gives all 4s, if they play a team where it's really bad, they'll give 1s, and it'll be very clear.
I wonder if also there's like, if we're going to keep this scoring system, if there could be better education around like if we want 10 to be a normal score, right? You want everyone gets 2s. Like every game you play should be 2 unless there's something egregious that happens either direction. Maybe we just need to have better skills or better tools to explain these things. And like they understand the rules, whatever the 3 categories were that we decided that were actually valuable. They're able to communicate, and they're not fouling intentionally, which is against the rules. Is there a way to explain to teams that, like, and maybe the teams that give all 4s or all 1s, they just don't buy into the system at all. Like, I guess that's a possibility. But, part of, like, if you're going to play this game, 10 is a good score. Give 10s unless something major happens. I don't know. I agree that like figuring out ways to normalize the score is super interesting. But
and even just the verbiage they use.
Better, would we even need to do that? I guess that's what.
Yeah, like we have technology now. Most of these things are online anyway. Just put some sliders on there, and don't use good and excellent as far apart on the scale, right? Like right now, I think 10 is good or 2 is good and 4 is excellent. And it's like, well, how do you define those words, right? Instead of, maybe we should use some classic smiley face system. Who knows, right? Like if it works for kids, it'll work for adult athletes playing Frisbee.
You're talking about that like sign that you put up in your gym wall and like, how are you feeling today? Like super smiley, straight smile, whatever.
Yeah.
This game was smiley.
Yeah, the education piece is interesting, Alison, because we have a really high turnover in the sport, and so the amount of effort, like I feel like the effort is there in educating people, but to get that from governing bodies to tournament directors to team captains to players, there's a lot of links there, and that typically just our sport is not so great at communicating, or we disagree with what's coming down from the top. So. The reason I get so fired up about it is the only other recourse we have now is blowing someone up on Twitter, which is effective, but it's not necessarily, quantifiable in a way that we can justify it.
Yeah, I have a lot of feelings about this. For traffic, what we did and what I've done when I've coached juniors is after the game, we assume everything's 2. We our spirit captain was Monica Sue this year. She'll say the category, describe the category. Everybody holds up a finger. If there's anyone that's deviating from 2, if there's one person, we ask them why. It has to be a trend in order for us to change positively or negatively. And we found that we were giving out 10s, 11s, sometimes 9s. And we never really moved beyond that little bit. Like, I feel like oftentimes when my team has had scores against us that I felt unjustified, it was because it was like one person just filling it out after by themselves, and they weren't asking the team. And it does seem like a good check-in. We also kind of did our spirit scores against ourselves. We would check it afterwards. Like, how do we think we were about fouls and body contact? Do you think we could be a little bit more cognizant of that for the next game and stuff? So there's value in it. Like, I don't want to be crapping on the system, because I do like it in general as a self-reflection tool. It does need some tweaks, and I like the idea of taking out and simplifying some of the categories as well, and teaching people a little bit more about like what is the kind of baseline expectation and what does that look like. Theo, are we ready to go onto the Instagram questions? How do you feel?
Yeah, my phone is my camera, so I cannot access the Instagram questions. So this is all you. You're gonna do a rapid fire Instagram questions, and whoever wants to answer can chime in. We got some good ones.
The first
there,
one
Danny,
is,
so,
what is ultimate? I'm not actually going to ask you that one. If the person doesn't know, then they probably shouldn't be following our podcast. Okay. I like this question. What player do you admire for their spirit? Because I think this will be very telling about what you individually admire for spirit. I can also start, but as a player, I kind of grew up playing in the same year as Jessie Schaffner, and I always really appreciated how she really felt I always felt like she really celebrated her team, and she kind of didn't really care about the kind of norms of the sport, and she was excited to watch. She would spike the disc, and she challenged things, and I always kind of admired her courage for that in terms of spirit. So that's who I would say.
I'm gonna go ahead and bow out of this question.
No problem. No problem.
I can't think of anyone specific that I would say I admire for their spirit. But definitely there are plenty of players when I was playing that, you always love to hate that matchup. It was super intense. It was always a battle, but there was a level of respect there because it was always a battle that, you came to appreciate over time. Maybe not the first couple of times you played against each other, but over time you kind of developed some kind of camaraderie, we're matched up again. And, I know you're going to make me work really hard, and I'm going to be working really hard. And to Khalif's point initially, no one is cheating. Everyone is, playing by the rules, but that battle just actually instills respect for the other player.
Nice.
Yeah, I don't know if I can think of a specific player, but the kinds of teams that are able to keep their energy, I think I mentioned this earlier, but more internalized, and so they're celebrating and they're inspiring themselves, and they'll lash out at you. If you poke the bear, you're gonna get swatted, kind of thing. If you try and kind of affect their energy, you get backlash, right? But teams that can do that quickly and basically shove whatever that negative energy is away and get back to their own teams, that's what I really love, because it allows you to keep that competitive fire without directing it towards an opponent. It's all internal. You're psyched about what you're doing. You're celebrating what you're doing with the energy that you want for your team. And then you don't let the other team affect that with kind of negativity. That it's a delicate balance, because it's really easy to then push all that energy right at someone if they get in the way. But I'm trying to think of teams that have done that. I don't know if experienced against, but I can't think of anything particular. But one player I would love to shout out, not that he needs more attention, but the classic thing in my mind when I think of spirit is that play that Mark Lloyd had against Colombia at World Games in Poland, where I think he was on defense and he made a layout block attempt, and him, I think one of the Cardenas sisters caught it at the same time. And you could just tell there was a foul call, and he sat there and he was pensive and reflective. He didn't react. He thought through it and said, yep, okay, that's he trusted that that call was made based on her perspective, and he could recognize what that perspective was and was willing to, he didn't feel like he was entitled to the winning outcome of that call. And so I think that, as someone that's played with Mark and that's had him as a leader, that is throughout his whole game, but to see it on that stage and that level of competition is kind of, in my mind, one of the really good examples of spirit in the sport.
Theo.
Yeah, that's a great example. And it also goes to the body contact too. He managed to avoid any body contact in that particular play. which was, I mean, we've all watched that repeat.
Khalif's like, no. What are you talking about? Theo, do you have a spirited person in mind? I know you've admitted you might not be the most spirited person on the field, so.
Well, it depends what people define as spirit, because the people that I respect, truthfully, like, you know, I had someone that a lot of people would say doesn't have good spirit in their perspective, and I had Dylan Freechild on my podcast a long time ago, and we talked about, you know, his fiery energy, the spiking after plays, and just the intensity that he plays with, and that's what he feels his spirit of the game is, to give his best in when he plays. And so I respect people that are fiery and care a lot about the sport and leave it all on the line. And to me, that's like spirited. It's not always the rah rah rah, like everyone's happy. So I think that's where like our definitions can sometimes be different. So that's my little plug there.
No problem. Okay, moving into our final question from Instagram. A lot of them were already kind of answered throughout the podcast through the other questions, but this other question is related to how do we bring in people to Spirit that are currently being excluded? Whether that's the definition, whether that's the way things have always been done. It's a meaty one.
It's a big question.
Yeah. You're all experts, so.
One of the things I would say, and I say this on knowingly being on the wrong side of it, but just, you know, not taking the space but creating the space, right? Like as a large assertive white male, I have all the opportunities to take space with my voice, with my body in the world, right? And that's something that I have to be very aware of, because it just is the natural programming that whatever my environment and that I've adopted and I need to change, right? But, you know, when I think back to like that Bay Area Disc article, probably 2 decades ago, I don't know when it was written about girls playing Ultimate, and how one of the things is that it gives a chance to find their voice, because you have to be able to stick up for yourself. And so giving people access to be able to stick up for themselves, I think is really important. And I think I'd be interested to hear Khalif's view as a mixed Ultimate player. Because especially in that space, typically you have the male voices dominating all the conversations, unless you have a very assertive non-male player that's willing to do it. And I think that concept of creating space instead of taking space, right? Like that's something I need to learn. And that's something that experienced players need to do way better job of in order to allow other people to experience Spirit.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that you're definitely right in that in the mixed scene, it is very easy for males to take up a lot of space. And we as Mixtape recognized that very early and did a lot of very specific things to combat that, which set us up for now having like a very female-dominated leadership space. That's everything from like having more women at our tryouts than men at our tryouts to like requiring a certain level of female leadership positions to be filled, like setting quotas that we have to hit. I think that you have to go like actively out of your way to create space. And when you're talking about something like Spirit, again, it is not just like the door is closed, and if you open the door, people will walk in. You have to like open the door, go outside, tell them that it's warm inside and have cookies, go hold their hand, take them, bring them inside, and then they're inside, and it's great. So I definitely care about that. I think one thing, I'm going to backtrack a little bit to what Theo was talking about Dylan, because I can't not say anything about that. Dylan Freechild was the reason why I started being spirited in the way that I was spirited, because Dylan's spirit was the same as mine, but Dylan was praised for his, and I was ridiculed for mine, or ridiculed or like exiled for mine when I did it. So Dylan made a whole like, tour of like being the dude who like would yell and scream and spike the disc, and everyone was like, haha, it's so awesome when he does it. But I would do I grew up doing the exact same things of him and like having the same sort of level of spirit, because I too shared that same sort of ideology about what spirit was. as long as you knew the game and you didn't like disrespect people and you knew the rules, you could like express yourself. And I was like very much told by the community, like, no, that's not okay. How could you do that? You're so awful. So like when you talk to me about like, what are people who you like think have great spirit? Like I looked at Dylan as someone who shares the same spirit sort of ideology as me. But we like went down to completely different, or I guess we were pushed down to completely different paths. So I just have to make sure that I say that.
It's on the record now, so
I'm not.
Appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah.
I think in terms of opening up the door for, go ahead, Alison. Sorry, I've already been talking.
All right, I'll go. I think for a long time also, like my idea of spirit was like, well, we have to do all these things in order to fit into the boxes so that like we get the good spirit scores and like, team values and everything are based on these. Like many years we had, a player contract. I don't know if anyone else does this, but we had a player contract and, one of the clauses was related to spirit and like, treating everybody respectfully and equally and blah, blah, blah. And not to say that it's not valuable, but I think, as I'm going to use the word evolve, maybe that's not the perfect word, but, as we start thinking about these things more in the context of like, okay, but, what is the basis for these rules and the requirements? And like, what are this, like we talked about at the beginning, like the social norms that sort of imply that we need to be behaving in a certain way in order to be considered spirited. And I think, if we're all humans, like if we can meet each other at some level of understanding, like I'm going to listen to your ideas and I'm not immediately going to shut them down just because they don't fit into my little box of like, well, that's not spirited, or like the rules say this, or we've always done it this way. I think the more that we're able to open our eyes to, well, actually, maybe it could be different, or maybe we need to evolve in our interpretation of what we, think 4 or 3 or 2 is, the better it will be for everybody, and the more the people are going to come in and want to have the cookies.
Yeah, I think we're going to be closing up here, but I do want to just let it be known for our audience, because I think we do have listeners from all different competition levels, that most of the people that are on this call are coming from either coaching juniors, so have the perspective of the value of spirit in that scenario, and then also competitive adult, whether it's national teams or like competitive club teams. So there is a different space of spirit that maybe wasn't described and talked about as much today, which is kind of that more rec adult space. And spirit also looks potentially quite different in there. So if you are one of those players, we're not telling you that it's not okay to dance and compliment people on the sideline. That's just the perspective that we're all most likely speaking from. I don't want to actually speak for all of you, but that's my assumptions anyway. So.
Yeah, I mean, spirit's kind of an agreement, right? Like you enter into a game, it's a non-official contract, right? Where if you're at a tournament where everyone's wearing costumes, you can't be mad that the other team's wearing costumes. Like you chose to play in that tournament. If you're playing at nationals and you want to wear a costume, maybe you're not the one to be getting mad at people for not wearing costumes, kind of thing. And so I think it's a bit of agreement you have, right? If you have a team where, you know each other really well, you play each other against each other a lot, and there's some smack talk, there's people that know each other, there's consistent battles, there's rivalries within the team, you kind of enter into agreement that the game's going to be more intense than if you're playing against a new team that's maybe international, or a younger team, for instance, right? It's you kind of have to get a feel for what that agreement looks like for that game, and then stay within it and communicate what that agreement is if it needs to change throughout the game.
So, Danny, that about wraps up our main event here on Spirit. We want to thank each guest, coming from different time zones, different parts of not just Canada, but the United States as well. So do appreciate that. So any final takes, hot takes, spicy takes, or just final words of wisdom to the Huckin Eh audience here? We'll let Fish start first. Any final words of wisdom?
I mean, when it comes to spirit of the game, I think just being more open to interpretation, doing your own research, looking into things, talking to people, and not just assuming that because it used to be like that or you think it should be like that, that that's the way it actually should be.
Khalif, any final words?
Yeah, I'll just restate that I think that spirit of the game is just a knowledge of the rules and not actively cheating, and that I think it can be that simple, and everything after that is where like it becomes super subjective and leads to conflict, in my opinion.
Dave.
Sure. Tournament directors and governing body officials, if you're going to make us use spirit scores, then make the numbers matter. That's it.
So you got 3 different words of wisdom there for all levels of players, tournament directors. Hopefully you're listening as well. Our resident fact checker we know is going to be listening, so he can take this into account. Sure. You know who you are. So thanks for coming in today. I do appreciate taking time out of your busy schedules to talk spirit with us. Obviously, this conversation will continue in the different spaces that you're in, and for the Huckin Eh audience in the spaces that you're in as well. So this is just the beginning of a good conversation about spirit, and excited to see everyone back on the field. In 2022. So thanks for coming in, everyone.
Well, everybody, I hope you made it through that entire episode. I know it was meaty. Theo hates it when I say that.
Oh, no, I hate when you use a different word.
What's the other word? Girthy? Yes, I remember.
Oh, no.
That was a girthy episode. So if you're still with us, congratulations. You heard all of the takes, all of the spicy takes, all of the heat coming from us. And maybe it's not really what you're expecting. And I do want to re-emphasize that the lens that we're all speaking from is either coaching juniors, where we're very in support of the kids doing spirit circles and working through those things. Absolutely. Love it. As a competitive adult player, that's kind of where we shift a little bit of perspective for like a little bit more like let people do what they want or what makes sense for them, and stop enforcing and imposing this potentially outdated version of spirit upon people that didn't help create that version of spirit. So I just want to make sure that if you felt like we weren't including you or including your experience with Ultimate, it's probably because our lens was kind of specifically talking about those 2 areas. So if you're more of a rec adult player, or you do like the spirit circles and stuff, like, power to you. We want to implore people to do what they like about spirit. And that's kind of the message that I hope was received. Let us know. If not, slide into our DMs. We're always available. We love to talk about this stuff, right, Theo?
Yeah, I'm actually very excited for the DMs because, once again, as Danie said, the DMs are open, and you can slide in them for sure. Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, email huckineh@ultiworld.com. But yeah, I want to echo what Danie said for sure. Yeah, of course, the lens we're viewing it from is from kind of the elite or competitive level, and we may have not represented your view necessarily in the episode. And yeah, we'd love to hear if you feel differently than our guests.
That's okay.
With anything with life, they're just expressing their perspectives from their experiences. So obviously, we all as humans have unique experiences. So we just take those and kind of grow from it. So we're excited to hear what you have to say about it. We appreciate those who responded on Instagram and those things like that. So we're actually going to talk more about it in our subscriber only, because I know we got some subscribers as well, not even just from Canada, which we do appreciate. But we're going to talk a little bit about Canada's reputation with spirit, because that was, Danie, we kind of glossed over it on the main panel there. But I don't know, I personally want to just dig a little deeper into Canada's reputation. Danie, you brought up to my attention a video on Reddit about Furious that, had some not so nice comments on Reddit. So we want to kind of talk about what is the reputation? Is it, deserved, blah, blah, blah. So subscribers, you get that bonus, and you can subscribe to Ultiworld. What do they say for as little as is it $4.99 a month or something? It's an American fund. Yeah. So
it's probably like $5.50 or something a month.
Yeah. You get the classic, it goes all the way up to the full or whatever. But subscribe to Ulti World, get more segments like this, other cool articles happening on their website. So, Danie, our next episode is TBD. Is that right? It's TBD for you. Keep you excited.
So many good ideas, and we have so many different guests that we kind of need to lure in to hang out with us. And so it's between two things. So we don't want to lock ourselves in right now, but just know it's going to be excellent.
I mean, it gets better and better every week. So, especially when we get back to the Ultimate season, we'll be back. I know you want us once a week. You'll get that when the season starts again. Not right now, off season, we'll take it down once every 2 weeks, but we'll be back weekly before you know it. So, thanks again for those who listen or watch wherever you are. You listen while you drive, you listen to us while you cook, whatever you do, we do appreciate it.
Thank you.
Salut, c'est Nina Prévost d'Iris Ultimate et de Team Canada et vous écoutez le podcast Huckin Eh, votre guide d'un océan à l'autre pour Ultimate canadien.